Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gun clicked empty, a hollow sound that echoed like a death knell against the wet brick of the alleyway. Jax didn't have time to curse. He only had time to bleed. Rain mingled with the crimson sluggishly tracking down his temple, blinding his left eye as he scrambled backward over slick pavement and rotting garbage. His pursuers were close. He could hear the heavy thud of combat boots splashing through puddles, the guttural snarls of alphas high on adrenaline and the scent of fear. Jax, the notorious Viper of Sector 4, the Omega who had never bowed to anyone, was cornered like a rat. He clutched his side, his breath hitching in a jagged sob he refused to release. A shadow fell over the mouth of the alley. It wasn't the thugs. It was a silhouette too lean, too still. A figure holding a black umbrella with the precision of a statue. Jax squinted through the downpour, his vision swimming. He recognized the rimless glasses flashing under the street lamp, the oversized beige cardigan, the posture of a man who spent his life shrinking into corners. It was Silas, the university archivist. The invisible, bookish alpha who stuttered when he asked for a library card. "Get out of here, Four Eyes," Jax rasped, trying to bare his teeth, though the growl died in his throat. "They'll kill you just for standing there." Silas didn't flinch. He didn't run. He stepped forward, his polished Oxfords making no sound on the wet asphalt, closing the distance between the predator and the prey. He looked at the blood on Jax's leather jacket, then at the empty gun on the ground. When he spoke, his voice lacked its usual tremble. It was a low, resonant baritone that vibrated in Jax's very marrow. "They won't kill me, Jax," Silas said, tilting the umbrella to shield the shivering Omega. "But they will certainly regret interrupting my evening walk." The transition from the freezing, metallic stench of the alley to the scent of sandalwood and old paper was jarring. Jax woke with a gasp, his body seizing instinctively as he reached for a weapon that wasn't there. "Easy." The word was spoken softly, yet it carried the weight of a command. Jax froze. He was lying on a couch that likely cost more than his entire motorcycle. The room was dimly lit, walls lined floor to ceiling with books, warm ambient light casting long shadows across a Persian rug. It was a fortress of solitude, smelling of wealth and silence. Jax tried to sit up, hissing as pain flared in his ribs. He looked down to see his torso neatly bandaged, the leather jacket removed, leaving him in his torn undershirt. "You lost a lot of blood," Silas said. He was sitting in a wingback chair across the room, reading a thick hardcover. He looked exactly as he did on campus. Hair slightly messy, thick glasses perched on his nose, wearing a soft, unassuming sweater. He looked like the kind of alpha who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. "I stitched the worst of it. The rest is just bruising." "You stitched it?" Jax narrowed his eyes, the fog in his brain clearing. He remembered the alley. He remembered Silas stepping between him and the three heavy hitters from the Iron Claws gang. He remembered. Nothing else. Just a blur of motion and then darkness. "How are we alive? Did you pay them off?" "Beg them." Silas turned a page, the sound loud in the quiet room. "Something like that." Jax scoffed, forcing himself to sit up despite the protest of his muscles. "You're an idiot. The Iron Claws don't take bribes from librarians. They'll come back. They know my scent." "They won't come back," Silas said, finally looking up. His eyes, usually hidden behind the glare of his lenses, were a startling, icy gray. "Drink the tea on the table. It has willow bark and ginger. It will help with the inflammation." "I don't want your tea. I need to leave." Jax swung his legs off the couch, but the room spun violently. He collapsed back against the cushions, cursing. As an Omega who had fought his way to the top of the underground racing circuit, relying on anyone was a weakness. Relying on a nerd like Silas, a man Jax had mocked just last week for dropping a stack of papers in the hallway, was humiliating. "Why help me?" Jax spat, glaring at the alpha. "I called you a waste of genetics on Tuesday. I told you alphas like you give the hierarchy a bad name." Silas closed his book with a soft thud. He stood up and walked to the kitchenette. "Because your analysis of the hierarchy is flawed, Jax. You perceive strength only as aggression, loud noises, violence. It makes you reckless." "It makes me a survivor," Jax countered. "It made you a target," Silas corrected, pouring hot water into a kettle. And as for why I saved you, perhaps I dislike seeing beautiful things broken. Jax felt a flush of heat rise up his neck, unrelated to his fever. Don't flirt with me, bookworm. You're not my type. I like men who can throw a punch, not men who throw quotes. Silas turned, leaning against the counter. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. Is that so? Then you should rest. You're safe here. My security system is comprehensive. For the next 3 days, Jax was a prisoner of luxury. The dynamic was maddening. Jax was loud, abrasive, and constantly testing boundaries. He cursed, he refused to eat. He paced the apartment like a caged tiger. Silas was the immovable object. He was calm, unbothered, and terrifyingly patient. He cooked complex, nutritious meals and set them down without a word. He changed Jax's bandages with hands that were steady and cool, ignoring Jax's insults. But there were cracks in the facade. On the second night, Jax woke up thirsty. Creeping toward the kitchen, he heard Silas on the phone in the study. The door was ajar. I said handle it. Silas's voice was different. It was cold. Absolute. I don't care if he's a councilman's son. If he approaches the perimeter again, break his legs. Do not disturb me with this again. Jax froze in the hallway. The voice didn't match the stuttering student. It sounded like a dawn. When Silas emerged a moment later, he spotted Jax. Immediately, his posture slumped slightly, the hard edge vanishing from his face. Did the pain wake you? Do you need more painkillers? Who were you talking to? Jax asked, eyes narrowing. Just family business, Silas murmured, adjusting his glasses. My uncle is very demanding about his estate management. I help with the paperwork. You sounded like a killer, Jax pressed. I was frustrated. Silas deflected smoothly. Go back to bed, Jax. The turning point came on the 4th day. The suppressants Jax had been taking, cheap, black market pills, wore off. His cycle wasn't due for a week, but the stress and the injury had triggered a biological crash. It started with a fever that burned from the inside out. The scent of distress, burnt sugar, and rain flooded the apartment. Jax collapsed in the hallway, clawing at his throat, his body screaming for an alpha's touch, for the grounding weight of a mate. Silas found him there. Most alphas would have lost control. The scent of an omega in preheat, especially one as potent as Jax, was biological heroin. Jax expected Silas to fumble, to panic, or worse, to turn into the beast Jax despised. Instead, Silas knelt. He didn't touch Jax. He stayed a foot away, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. Jax, Silas said, his voice strained but controlled. Where are your suppressants? Out. Jax gasped, writhing on the floor. Need? I need. He reached out, grabbing Silas's wrist. The contact was electric. Jax whined, a shameful, high-pitched sound that tore from his chest. Help me. It was an invitation. A plea. Silas looked down at Jax, his gray eyes darkening to charcoal. He removed Jax's hand from his wrist, but he didn't let go. He held Jax's hand firmly, grounding him. I will not take you like this, Silas whispered. Not when you are vulnerable. Not when you are in pain. I don't care, Jax sobbed, the heat consuming his rationality. Make it stop. I will. Silas stood up, pulling Jax effortlessly into his arms. He didn't carry him to the bedroom. He carried him to the bathroom. He set Jax down and turned on the shower, setting it to lukewarm. He stepped in with him, fully clothed, letting the water soak his expensive sweater. He held Jax under the spray, washing away the sweat and the pheromones. He murmured low, rhythmic nonsense words, using his alpha voice, not to command, but to soothe. It was a rumble that settled the chaotic static in Jax's brain. Silas was a wall of ice against Jax's fire. For hours, they sat on the tiled floor. Silas didn't grope. He didn't take. He just held. When the fever finally broke, leaving Jax shivering and exhausted, he looked up at the man holding him. Silas was soaked, his glasses fogged, his hair plastered to his forehead. You're weird, Jax whispered, his teeth chattering. And you are trouble, Silas replied, squeezing water out of his sleeve. Why didn't you? Jax asked, looking away. Any other alpha would have. I am not any other alpha, Silas said quietly. And you deserve to be chosen, Jax. Not taken. The realization hit Jax harder than a fist. He had spent his life fighting alphas who wanted to own him. He had never met one who wanted to know him. But peace in the underworld is fragile. 2 days later, the real world came knocking. Or rather, crashing. The front door of the apartment exploded inward. Jax was in the kitchen. Silas was in the study. 3 men stormed in. The Iron Claws had found them. And they hadn't come alone. Their leader, a brute named Kale, stepped over the debris. "Did you think you could hide in a library, little viper?" Kale sneered, spotting Jax. He raised a heavy pistol. "And you dragged a civilian into this. How sloppy." Jax reached for a knife on the counter, adrenaline spiking, but he was still weak. "Leave him out of this, Kale. He's nobody. He's a witness." Kale shrugged. "Kill the Omega. Then kill the Four Eyes." "No," Jax screamed, lunging forward. But before Kale could pull the trigger, the study door opened. It didn't bang open. It opened slowly. Silas stepped out. He wasn't wearing his glasses. He was wearing a black dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were corded with muscle Jax hadn't noticed under the baggy sweaters. Silas looked at the shattered door. He looked at Kale. And then he smiled. It wasn't the shy, awkward smile of the librarian. It was a smile of pure, predatory malice. "Kale of the Iron Claws," Silas said. His voice wasn't loud, but the command in it was so potent that Kale's beta henchmen dropped to their knees, clutching their ears, whining in pain. Even Jax felt the pressure, a heavy gravity pushing him down. Kale staggered, his gun wavering. "What? Who are you?" Silas walked forward. He didn't run. He walked with the casual arrogance of a king entering a slaughterhouse. He stopped right in front of the gun barrel. "You broke my door," Silas said, his tone conversational. "And you threatened my guest. Shoot him." Kale screamed at his men, but they were paralyzed by the pheromones radiating from Silas, a scent of ozone, crushed pine, and absolute dominance. This wasn't a student. This was a prime alpha. Silas reached out and took the gun from Kale's hand. Kale tried to resist, but Silas twisted his wrist with a sickening crack. Kale howled. With a fluid motion, Silas kicked Kale's knee, shattering it, and sent the massive man sprawling. He stood over the gang leader, looking down with cold disinterest. "You asked who I am," Silas said. "I am Silas Vane." Jax gasped. Vane. The Vane family owned half the city. They were the shadowy benefactors of the university, the hospitals, and the mob that policed the mobs. Silas wasn't just rich. He was royalty of the underworld. "V. Vane." Kale stuttered, blood dripping from his lip. "We didn't know. He was just a biker." "He is mine," Silas stated. The possessiveness in the words made Jax's heart hammer against his ribs. Silas crouched, grabbing Kale by the throat. "If you ever look at him again, if you ever breathe the same air as him, I will dismantle your entire organization brick by brick. Do you understand?" "Yes," Kale wheezed. "Yes, Lord Vane." "Good. Now, clean up this mess. And get out." The thugs scrambled over each other to escape, dragging their leader with them. The silence that followed was deafening. Jax stood by the kitchen island, staring at the man he thought he knew. Silas turned, the cold mask slipping just a fraction as he saw Jax's expression. He walked over to the counter where he had left his glasses, putting them back on. He adjusted his sweater, trying to shrink back into the nerd. "I apologize for the noise," Silas said, avoiding Jax's gaze. I prefer to avoid politics." "You're Silas Vane?" Jax whispered. "The ghost of the North District. People say you don't exist." "I try not to," Silas admitted. "It's exhausting. People always want something. They want the power, the money, the protection." He looked at Jax, his eyes vulnerable for the first time. "I just wanted to read my books. And I wanted to be liked for me, not for the name." Jax looked at the man in front of him. He saw the lethal power coiled beneath the skin, the capacity for violence that rivaled his own. But he also saw the man who had sat on the bathroom floor for 5 hours, soaking wet, singing lullabies to keep an Omega safe from his own instincts. Jax walked forward. The fear was gone. He reached out and took the glasses off Silas's face, folding them and setting them on the counter. "You're a terrifying liar, Silas," Jax murmured, stepping into the Alpha's personal space. "I didn't lie," Silas said softly, his hands hesitating before settling on Jax's waist. "I omitted." "Why the act? The sweaters? The stutter?" "Because when I'm Silas Vane, Everyone fears me. Or they want to use me. Silas's thumb brushed Jax's cheekbone. I wanted to know if anyone could see the man behind the monster. Jax smirked, wrapping his arms around Silas's neck. He pulled the alpha down, their foreheads touching. Well, Jax whispered, I think the monster is kind of hot. But I prefer the nerd who makes me tea. Silas let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. A genuine smile broke through, warm and bright. I can be both. If you'll let me. I'm a lot to handle, Vane, Jax warned. I get into fights. I drive too fast. I hate authority. I know, Silas murmured, tilting his head to brush his lips against Jax's. That's why you're the only variable I can't predict. And I find that incredibly addicting. Jax closed the gap, kissing him. It wasn't soft. It was a collision, a claim. It was the taste of rain, blood, and sandalwood. It was the promise of trouble and the promise of protection. The bad boy had found his match, and the nerd had found his crown. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, or perhaps, how the wolf finally found a reason to bare his teeth. If you enjoyed seeing Silas drop the act and take absolute control, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a partner who hid their true identity and power from you for your own protection? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, Man 1. Bad boy Omega. Messy black hair, leather jacket hanging off shoulders, bandaged torso, tattoos on neck, defiant expression, leaning back against kitchen counter. Man 2. Nerd alpha, standing close, wearing black dress shirt with rolled up sleeves, holding glasses in one hand, other hand on Man 1's waist, intense possessive gaze, sharp jawline, hidden strength. Background is modern luxury apartment, shattered door in background, warm lighting, tension, cinematic composition, intricate details.